Okay, welcome to the second go-to session for week 3. We're going to talk a little bit more about digital citizenship, and then toward the end of the session, I'm going to talk a little bit about Sunday night's assignment, which doesn't require as much walking through this time because it's in some ways similar to what you just did last week. Some real quick announcements. I've done things a little bit not backwards, but out of order this week, in that I've immediately started grading your major assignment from last Sunday, the Research Incredible Connections assignment. I'm pretty much done with those. I only have like one or two people to look at, and then I'll go back and look at the team debate stuff that you did last week. Remember the group work. By the way, Team C chose Team B's response as the strongest one, so I'll make an announcement about that on FSO as well, declaring a winner. But don't think that I've sort of forgotten about the shorter assignments from last week. It's just that I concentrate on the big fish to begin with. Okay, so let's talk just a little bit more about digital citizenship. On Tuesday, we focused on those 9 elements, kind of covering what they are and what they cover. But this week, I'd really like to talk about digital citizenship kind of at a deeper level, because what we try to preach in this class, at least, is that digital citizenship is more than just tools, or even more than just tools, but even more than just behavior. I think most people know that digital citizenship goes beyond just learning how to use different pieces of software. Uh, but sometimes people think that it only extends into behavior issues as well. Like when you go online, you should be a nice person, blah, blah, blah. But it's even deeper than that, I think. Let's see, someone has their hand up. Let's see. For some reason, it's not letting me. There we go. Okay, Josh, you should be able to speak if you want to. Okay. Yeah, is your name included among the group members stuff? Okay. Then yeah, that's what's most important. I've actually had a couple people comment on this, so I guess it's pretty important that it came up during the session. Yeah, yeah. Basically, I don't worry about it. It won't clear until I grade it. Um, so yeah, I know a couple other people have said that it's a little bit it's freaking them out to see the red exclamation point telling them that they have an activity that's incomplete. Don't worry, it just means that I haven't gotten around to entering a grade, and when I do, that stuff will disappear. So as long as the assignment was handed in and your name is included among the team members, you're fine. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and mute everyone again. Yeah, I know, Chanda. That's one of the annoying things. And usually I do things in order, so I immediately grade the team debate stuff before I get to the research incredible connections. But I wanted to get the big stuff done kind of earlier this week, so people weren't waiting till Friday to get feedback on that kind of major assignment. But yeah, it sort of lights up as something incomplete on your end. Okay, where was I? Oh yeah, digital citizenship. That it's more than just tools, learning specific sets of software, and it's more about, hey, when you go online, be a nice person and don't illegally download things. Okay, I think digital citizenship digs even deeper than that. If you look at the word citizenship, just as you're a citizen of a country, or a citizen of this planet, right? In the real sense, you're also a citizen in a very very similar way when you go online, and that's kind of what I want to talk a little bit about today. So, uh, for instance, digital literacy is something we've been talking a lot about in this course. What it means to be literate. Usually, when we think of literacy, we think of just the ability to write and read. When we talk about digital literacy, it makes people think that it's just about being able to make sense and operate various software and tools. But note that digital literacy also means all this stuff, right? Knowing how to read data, knowing how to sort through information, knowing how to read things visually. Okay, either from the user end or if you're someone who actually creates materials, what's the best way to arrange things visually, right? That requires a certain kind of literacy skill, which in this class we don't really teach, but in other classes, depending on what your area is, you might. And I know sometimes in English class we do teach sometimes some instructors about basic layout principles. But I mean, the basic thing here is look at all the stuff that it covers. And the big one I'm going to focus on today is kind of this one here, critical reasoning, because this is a skill that's always been valued. Even before technology came along, even when centuries ago, when things were still done sort of the old way, when we just had books and paper and pens and all that. I mean, critical reasoning is kind of something that makes us human and makes us stand out from other animals. And it's an important tool to have when you deal with technology as well. Okay, so what does critical thinking include? Well, it includes things like you just had to deal with for that last assignment, right? Where you had to look at four articles and determine their trustworthiness. So, critical thinking involves the ability to determine whether or not information is credible, being able to sort those things out. Or the other stuff we talked about from week two, right? Like when you go online, how do you separate fact from fiction? Um, what techniques can you use? You read an article about the 10 C's that kind of gave you some tips on how to do that. Uh, but there are other ways, even just using sort of your own personal logic or intuition to figure these things out. But that requires your brain to sort of be processing things and really thinking things through, and not just accepting things on the surface. Critical thinking also requires learning to slow down, which in the digital age is really, really difficult to do. Um, One of the interesting things about being my age is that I've lived through lots of technological developments. So, do you remember back in week one, I discussed how I was a digital adapter because I didn't naturally grow up around all this technology that you guys have. And I can remember older times. If you remember that week one go-to session, I even joked about how frozen dinners at one time were not these things you could just pop in the microwave and be ready to eat in 5 minutes. That they'd actually take about 40 minutes to cook, and you'd be so excited waiting there for 40 minutes for this food that was god awful, but and came in like an aluminum foil tray, but it seemed space age at the time. Well, one of the interesting things about it is technology has progressed, so has the speed of time, right? So in the late 1970s, you'd have to be patient for a frozen dinner to cook for 40 minutes. Now I have no patience waiting for something to cook in the microwave for 6 minutes. I don't even have the patience to wait for something to cook in a minute in the microwave, right? Because the faster things move, and by the way, I'm not just making it up. There's been things that have been written about this because technology speeds up, so does our sense of time. So it's not just a coincidence as download speeds increase, our demand for other things to be done fast and efficiently also increases. The fact that we're hit with constant barrage of images and those sort of ticker updates that roll across the bottom of your television screen. It's not coincidence that we sometimes have, as Josh says, attention deficit disorder, which is, you know, a feeling of almost a feeling of being bored unless you have some sort of stimuli hitting you. And yeah, back to like the example of downloading. Like I remember the old days from like the late 1990s when Napster was like the big controversy because that was like one of the first really big piracy software that allowed you to download music. And you'd sit there sometimes for hours waiting for a single song to download, but you did it. And now, of course, you download legally, like let's say, I don't know, a 300 megabyte file, which isn't very large at all. And the fact that it takes, I don't know, 2 minutes drives you crazy, right? So, I mean, technology is awesome. I think it's awesome the way that things can be done on demand, and we can stream movies, and we can stream music, and we can bring up things on Netflix. But one of the problems is that it just speeds up our brains, and critical thinking actually requires us to slow down a little bit. So pick your spots, okay? Pick your spots to slow down. Uh, And finally, yeah, critical thinking, being able to access several information types and points of view before reaching a conclusion. Again, this is kind of connected to the advice to slow down. We can't really judge things or evaluate things unless we kind of consider them from a variety of angles and really think things through before we reach a conclusion. Again, that's a danger. We get so much information that we tend to accept it just on its surface, right? We see some sort of story or a friend shares something with us or someone passes along information. We typically don't question it, um, and we should. Digital literacy and being a digital citizen for the 21st century also, involves global issues and social responsibility. Um, a good way to think of this is that in the old days, by old days I mean even as even as recently as like 10 years ago or so, uh, we lived in the metaphor I would use here is that we lived kind of in the analog world. It was a world that was very local. I mean, it wasn't completely local. There have always been world events and world tragedies and pushes to raise money for these children in Africa or these war refugees in Eastern Europe or what have you. But the world was very much more local. Uh, it didn't mean that you only cared about the people in your household, but you tended to care mostly about the people who you knew in your immediate contact realm, right? And today, in the 21st century, the digital world means we're more global. I should actually put down there that we're local and global because there's been an interesting push and pull here. Where, on the one hand, yes, absolutely, we are so much more global than ever. I mean, we were kind of joking last week about how many friends you guys have on Facebook, and you guys have like 800, 1,000. I have none. Um, but I'm willing to bet that somewhere among your friends list, you have people who are not in this country. I'll even go out on a limb and say that maybe a couple of you regularly communicate, or at least communicate a couple times a year, with people who you don't know directly. That maybe they're living in Europe. Maybe you've regularly gone online to play games with someone who's living in, oh, I don't know, Scotland or Brazil or something like that. By the way, I'm curious. Josh seems to say like that's true that every week he's meeting people like that. How about others? Do you have regular contact with people who are not from your immediate area, like not from your city, not even necessarily from your country? Has the online world and its more global outlook truly made you more global? Okay, Chanda says sometimes. Um, Yeah, and I think I mean the great thing about that, I swear I'm not just trying to be PC or polite, but I really honestly believe this. I mean the great thing is that I think that people today and in 2014, especially young people, seem to be more respectful and more knowledgeable and more open to the variety of viewpoints that exist in the world than, for example, people my age are. People my age tend to be either open-minded and embrace things like me, and then you get stubborn folks who aren't really interested in anything that's beyond the length of their arm or something. But that's the difference, right? In the old world, we kind of lived in an analog environment where we cared much more about local issues, whereas today it's much more global. Uh, let's see. Oh yeah, I was going to say real quickly too that for digital I should say global and local because there actually has been an interesting push towards emphasizing local communities even more, which is kind of interesting that in 2014 it's actually both we've become more global and in some ways become even more intensely local, which is kind of cool. Next, that yeah, when we're talking about digital literacy and the specific use of digital tools, we're not just talking about how to use tools, right? I mean, it's cool that you guys have now learned to use Digo. You know how to take screenshots. Some of you who don't have software installed in your system, you now know how to use Google Docs. Most of you already knew how to do this stuff anyways. Most of you already knew how to, use cloud-based tools. But again, like I said at the very beginning, it's more than just using the digital tools, but it's actually doing something with them. Um, so, we could teach you quite literally to use something as simple as Microsoft Word or GarageBand or iMovie, we could do that, and there would be some value in that. It's always great to learn how to learn new pieces of software. But actually, in the 21st century, what you need to even concentrate on more, I think, is to really use these tools to your benefit, which means to actually do things with them and create things with them. So, who here among us? We have three people now. We have O'Shane, we have Chanda, we have Josh. Do any of you regularly create using tools? And when I say create, ideally it would be nice if it was something more than, oh yeah, I type an essay in Microsoft Word. Or, I mean, are there people here who really use technology in creative ways? You're not just using tools, right? I mean, like anybody can use a pen and paper and write, but that's quite a bit different than creating a short story or a poem using those tools. Josh says he makes some art every now and then. Okay, and what kind of digital tools do you use to do that? Are you just goofing around, or are you someone who really knows how to take, for example, a hand drawn picture, scan it into the computer, upload it into Photoshop, use that then to sort of add firm lines, add color if you want, add shadings? Uh, you use an app. How about any other people, Chanda or O'Shane? Are you guys kind of new to using tools and you're just still learning the steps involved, or have you actually created using them? Right? Like I'm not much of a true innovator, but I'm happy that not only do I technically know how to use iMovie, but I've actually used it to create welcome videos, for example. Um, okay, Chanda says she uses Digo. Uh, yeah, that's awesome. And in time, hopefully, you'll embrace. By the way, what's your field, Chanda? Okay, Final Cut Pro to make little movies. Okay, good. There's a great example, right? You're not just using you don't know how to use a tool on a very basic level. Although maybe your knowledge of it is still kind of more on the beginner side, but you're not just, I don't know. You're using it for more than just the very very basic. Um, Okay, so yeah, creation with these tools is important. That you'll need to actually learn how to do things. Because if you think about it, behind every screen is a code. Right now, you're watching a screen. You're actually watching my screen, which has a PowerPoint presentation. But of course, someone needed to actually create these tools that allowed me then to create things. Um, and I'm not saying that everybody has to become a programmer. Okay, we have people here full sail who are very good at that. Um, and then we have people like me who would never succeed in areas like game design or programming or mobile app design. Uh, but still, I think it is important for every person to become not literally a programmer, but someone who's comfortable enough to use tools to actually create things, not just do things, not just complete basic tasks, but actually create things. Chanda says HTML. Yeah, there's a good example. I mean, we've gotten to the point where it's pretty easy. I shouldn't say easy, but we have like free online tools where we can create basic websites. We have, you know, we have tools that will help you set up a blog in seconds. So it's not like I remember the old days, like in the 1990s, getting at checking out a book on HTML, because in those days, if you wanted to create even a basic website, like you had to code it in yourself. But still, from what I understand, because I'm not an expert on this stuff at all, but like if you really need to create a nifty web page, you still need to know HTML. But again, I'm not even pushing people for necessarily to know that, but just know that you have these tools out there and that you can create things with them. Okay, that goes beyond just completing basic daily tasks like, I don't know, checking email or sending out a memo, but that you can actually use these tools to do pretty powerful things. And that's a big part of digital citizenship. And by the way, finding success out there in the job market as well. I would argue. Um, it's pretty rough right now in 2014 to head out into the job world as someone who has, I think, very very limited and basic digital skills. The more things you can do, I think the stronger of a position you're going to be in. That's one of the things I'm happy about coming to Full Scale, because it's really pushed me to become more of that kind of person. Uh, Now I'm going to switch just a tiny bit and say that as much as I love teaching digital literacy and as much as I embrace new technology, I mean, the traditional skills still are valuable. Okay, and I'm not just saying that because I'm an English teacher or because I don't know that I refuse to get out of the past. No, no, no. I'm going to try to make the case that traditional skills still have value. So let's go through a couple of the big ones. Okay, so reading and writing. I'm going to ask two questions. You can use the chat box to give me an answer real quickly. A, do you believe that reading and writing is still important? And B, why? Don't just say it because, oh well, in addition to DGL, David also teaches English, so of course he's going to like reading and writing. I'm not here to convert people into being little English majors or screenwriters or whatever. I could not care less, but I'm going to argue that reading and writing are important. So, do you agree with that? Josh says yes. Okay, but why? Josh says it's important because he likes the feel of an actual book. Okay, I kind of see what that means. Though I'm even talking the broader sense. I'm not talking just literally about whether you like books or not, or whether you like to read vampire stories or not, but the actual skill of being able to read and write. Is that still important, and why? No thoughts? You can argue the opposite if you want. If you want to argue that they're not so important, because I actually have students, not many, but I'll get a handful of students who will say, "Oh, I don't know why you're worrying about my writing skills. It's 2014. Nobody cares about that anymore. Everything is tweets. Everything is or face-to-face discussion. You're just protecting a dying world and writing. Get with the times, man." Chanda started to say something. Yes, because if you don't know how to, then curious to see the conclusion of that. It's like you're illiterate. Okay. And Josh says writing is important because if you cannot write formally, then you will not be able to publish a scientific paper or an academic paper of any sort. Okay, yeah, I agree. I would say that I'm not sure everybody's going into that academic of an area, but I think what you said combined with kind of what China was saying as well is what's important. I think I made this point in a previous session. I can't remember which one, but I believe I made the pitch that there's a skill in being able to sort of speak different languages. Like literally speaking different languages is awesome if you can speak both Spanish and English or French and English or Chinese and English. But I also think that the ability to speak in different modes or write in different modes is important as well. So you might speak one way with friends and family, and you might speak another way with colleagues. You might speak one way when you are with a certain group of people, but not another. Um, and I think there's value in that, but you have to learn how to go between those different modes. Chanda says if technology shuts down a life, we would still have to know. Okay, there's that too. Uh, it's not. I mean, I'm not really fearing like the Road Warrior scenario where an apocalypse comes and we have to return to basics. But yeah, there are times where, listen, there's still value in being able to sort of communicate by the written word, right? There are times where we need to pass on instructions. And if we aren't doing that face to face or over the phone, and by the way, there's still value in the written word because sometimes, for example, with instructions, you can go over the instructions again and again and again in a way that's difficult to do, like over the phone with somebody. And obviously, with something like instructions, it's pretty important that the instructions be really clear. So your writing skills would have to be pretty sharp. Um, but yeah, I'm not like old school in the sense I understand that people text, I understand that people tweet, I understand that people go on Facebook and post status updates and they're not really following the rules of grammar. That's fine because in those situations it's perfectly acceptable and I get that. But there really still is this need to write and speak in another way as well. Um, and like this will sound cruel, but if you look at the really successful people out there in whatever sector of the job market you want to look at, like they all have pretty much the same things in common. They write well, they speak well, and they're pretty good workers, and they're pretty knowledgeable about their fields. I was just talking about this the other day with someone who teaches uh, the entertainment business, music production slash sports marketing and media overview course. I don't know if you guys have looked at your course of study, your map, if you will, for the next year or two. But usually in your fourth month, you take what's called an overview course. So depending on what your field is, you have a specific course that's, well, it's just like what I said, an overview. It kind of is an introduction to your field, your area overall. So I was speaking to an instructor who was specifically teaching an overview course in entertainment business slash music business slash sports marketing media. And we were talking after class one day, and he was like, I'm trying to get it through to my students that there really is importance in being able to read and write. He's like, I'm not an English teacher, so I maybe don't look for the things that other teachers do, but he's like, I really try to get through to them that they're going to need these skills because, man, when you look at the leaders of businesses, when you look at the people who are promoted, when you look at the people who are really advancing in the ranks, they all have these things in common. So that's my push. And I'll move a little bit faster through the next one because I know that I tend to get on my soapbox at times. So, public speaking. Okay, so everything I just said about writing and reading, just transfer it to public speaking. The same thing. I may not be the most eloquent speaker in the world. Sometimes, even after these sessions, I think, oh, I could have explained that better, or I could have, been more lucid when I was going over this point. But still, I think a basic ability to communicate information, either one on one or to a group of people, but out loud rather than on the page, is also an important skill to have. Again, it's awesome that we have texting and we have all these other means to kind of exchange information, but the ability to speak either one on one, in person, or online, for example, this go to session, or in a face to face visual call, right? Like you're Skyping another person. There's still tremendous value in that. Um, and there's it's amazing there still is in the old days it was called the conference call where someone would put their voice on speaker so an entire room could hear. We now have that equivalent but with like Skype or with GoToMeeting. I mean I've attended lots of those where there's a person who's speaking and leading just like they would any meeting even if they're not present in the room. So public speaking, yeah, still remains really really important. So does logic, reasoning, debate, and argument. um, Gosh, I don't want to start arguments of my own, but have you ever been like, let me give like a really basic example. Have you ever been in a discussion board or, a forum or, I don't think anybody really chats anymore, but have you ever been in these environments? Maybe the message board is devoted to video games or maybe it's devoted to, uh, what are music, maybe it's devoted to politics, maybe it's devoted to sports. And there's always that person who comes to the room and makes like some sort of ridiculous argument point. And I'm not just saying like personally, like oh I don't agree with that. Like just from a solid, stance of reasoning. And sadly, I bump into these people all the time. I wish I could give a concrete example. I probably could, but then it would get into areas that probably aren't polite for this session. But like I'm really disturbed at how few people are able to sort of rely on the basics of logic, um, debate, and so on. It's not that everything has to be an argument, like a fist fight. I'm not suggesting that at all, but just like really really basic stuff. The kind of arguments that can be sort of dismantled in a couple seconds. That disturbs me because, again, if we think back to the assignments we've been doing in this class, your ability to separate fact from fiction or your ability to determine whether an article is trustworthy or not kind of depends on that ability to sort of reason and really critically examine something. And so when you see that this is a skill that seems to be diminishing, it's a concern for me. Yeah, Josh, I'm not going to touch religion with a 10-foot pole. Uh, but yeah, if we don't kind of build these critical reasoning skills, then I think how can we be the most responsible and knowledgeable people out in the world whether it's the physical world or online, that we can be. So yeah, solid logic, solid reasoning. They used to teach these things in high school, by the way. Uh, right? They used to teach things like logical fallacy. Sometimes you got it in math class. Sometimes you got it in a philosophy class. If you took a philosophy class at the college level, I don't know if they still teach this anymore. Right? Remember, I remember in geometry class, and when I was, I don't know, a sophomore in high school, like they taught, like there was a couple week period devoted to logic, things like syllogisms and you know, holding up individual statements to see if they were logically sound. And it seemed weird that it would be in a geometry class, but in a way it made sense because the sort of deductive reasoning you had to apply to arguments did have this sort of mathematical sharpness to it. Yeah, Josh mentions logical fallacies. Yeah, yeah, stuff like that. And yeah, like I said, we've already put this into practice somewhat with our assignments. History. Okay, I actually tapped into history a little bit when I was talking before, but I was doing so in a roundabout way. Remember when I was talking about how as technology speeds up, our sense of time speeds up as well? Well, one of the negative sort of side effects of that is that we have a decreased sense of the importance of history. Um, there when things speed up, it makes us much more aware of now. It's like, why isn't my microwave dinner done now? Why do I have to wait 3 minutes for it to cook? You know, why is Netflix taking so long to load? Why isn't my movie happening right now? Right? There's an intense sense of nowness, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. We demand things immediately. Uh, and that one of the byproducts of that is we're more in the present than ever before, but at the cost of not having an appreciation of history. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, that's garbage. I appreciate history. I respect history. I'm not talking about just respecting it in the abstract. I'm saying like truly understanding that, that past events have happened and that past events have shaped who we are and where we live, right? It means being able to look back on something like the Civil War and to really understand like what role it played in our country's formation, or what role it still plays in terms of the divisions that exist in this country, for instance. Um, and too often you see, and I'm not saying it's a young person thing, because I think even for my people my age, it's an issue. This intense kind of focus on now so much that history sort of gets diluted. But you have these Civil War reenactments. You have these. You can take tours of like mansions that were still in existence during the Civil War. I'm just going to keep using the Civil War as an example because it's such a major event in U.S. history. But like there are people who I don't think really understand what those things mean historically. It's almost like well, I live in Orlando, so it's almost like a Disney exhibit, or it's a tourist thing to do. They understand on some level that this mansion existed during the Civil War, or they understand that the reenactment is somehow paying tribute to the war, but the actual facts of what happened don't seem to resonate. Um, so I think that's the importance of understanding history. That history really did play a role. It kind of shaped who we are and who this country is. And what's the old cliche too, right? That if we don't know history, we're sort of doomed to repeat its mistakes. I think there's some importance there too. And I'm not just talking about literal dates of things. Like, I don't care that if you don't remember that the American Civil War was 1861 to 1865, or that U.S. involvement in World War II was what, 1941 to 1945. I don't care if you remember exact dates or know names of every figure, but I do think that people have to have at least a pretty strong general knowledge of what things are. Like, I'm not going to quiz you guys because I'm not trying to be the mean instructor, and I'm not trying to like find out what people know. But I sometimes get really, really disturbed when people can't even pinpoint like when World War One took place. Like, not even in a general sense. Like if they said, I don't know, sometime in the late 20s. Okay, that's wrong, but at least they would be kind of close. There are people who don't know what century it occurred in. There are people who don't know whether the Civil War came first, or the World War One happened first. Yeah, good, Josh. Good answer. I think I feel bad because I don't know the exact years. I'd have to Google it, but those years sound close-ish. I want to say U.S. involvement came a little bit later because there was the sinking of the Lusitania, which kind of sparked our involvement. I want to say that happened a few years later, but I think the war itself in Europe, because again, it was an example of us joining pretty late into the conflict toward the end. Um, but I'm just trying to show off my my knowledge without googling. I could Google and find out in 2 seconds. But if we don't have some sort of knowledge of history, it's kind of sad, and not just from an old school perspective, like you better dust off your books and read about it. No, no, no. I just mean you should know basic things. Um, I'm always shocked that there are people who don't know what the Cold War is. I'm not going to ask people because I'm not interested in embarrassing people based on what they know or what they don't know. Uh, but it's a little sad. So what we're really asking for is full digital awareness. Okay, that's the goal here. It's not just knowing how to use tools, although that's important. It's not just knowing how to go online and be a pretty responsible person. Okay, just as you wouldn't walk out your door and be a complete, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a polite word that just as you don't go out your door and be completely obnoxious to everybody you see, you probably shouldn't be doing that online either. Uh, but beyond tools and behavior, it also means that we still kind of take the things that we already appreciate and recognize that are important, like traditional skills or skills that are connected to digital citizenship or issues that are related to global awareness, and just bring those with us into the 21st century and online. Oh, okay. I guess that's the end of my speech on that. Let's talk about this Sunday's assignment. Unlike in the past, I'm not really going to spend as much time explaining this because I'm going to show you the instruction sheet and go over the basics and remind you some things in the rubric, then give you some tips and tricks to keep in mind to sort of mostly do well on the assignment. But the reason why I'm not going to go into a detailed walkthrough like I did with the DIGO assignment from week one or the researching articles assignment from week two is that this is sort of asking you to put into place the tools you've already been using on those previous assignments. So let's take a look at the assignment sheet itself. Okay, I'm not going to read everything out loud, but you can see the gist of it is here that using the methods you've learned so far, you're going to look at the Boston Marathon bombing of 2013. And your goal here is basically pretty simple. I'll give some tips on how you might organize things or go about it. But basically, you're going to examine how digital citizenship played a role. Okay? Um, More specifically, how digital tools were used and impacted the event. Um, Again, kind of like last Sunday's assignment, it's going to take the form of a presentation. You can use whatever presentation tool you think is best. So if you like PowerPoint or Keynote, great. Lots of people use Prezi. I was proud to see that some people tried out the blog formats. What else did I see? I even saw people use some pretty old school things like Microsoft Word, but it still pretty much worked. Like it wasn't just a wall of text. There were images. It was arranged logically. So you can use whatever presentation tool you think is best. But your real goal is to look at the Boston Marathon. Okay, so we're talking about the bombing itself, um, and really examining the role that digital tools and the larger concept of digital citizenship played a role. You can look at events that led up to the event. You can look at the event itself or its aftermath. With the Boston Marathon, you're probably going to be looking perhaps more. I mean, the story doesn't really begin, unfortunately, until the tragedy happens. So you'll probably be looking more at the event itself and its aftermath. Uh, but your job is to run out there and kind of do research. Okay, you need at least four credible sources, um, and using that research, you'll put together a short presentation where you explore the role that digital citizenship and digital tools played in this event. Okay. Yeah, if I had to put it even more simpler than that, your job is to go out there, read a bunch on the Boston Marathon, but read specifically along the lines of digital tools and citizenship. So we're talking about issues that relate to like the media, uh, social networking, things like that, and then sort of come up with a short report or presentation on it. Trying to say I forgot the AP picture links. Are you talking about for this assignment or the last assignment? Because I didn't check yet, but I know it looks like two people already handed in this assignment I'm about to discuss. So, oh, okay, yeah. So this time, if you use AP images, don't forget that you don't have to use AP images. But I'm gonna give some tips in just a second where I'll actually recommend that you might. And you can read through the rest of this on your own. Okay, it goes over all the basic stuffs. Um, let's see, where do I want to go next? Oh, okay. Let me go back to the presentation thing. So here's a list of tips and tricks. If you think this might be useful, I don't know, take a screenshot or watch it again later and pause your screen on this. But like here's you don't have to do it this way. There are lots of different ways to organize things, and even with last week's activity, lots of people had different ways that they put together their information on their four articles. But if you're completely lost, like here are some general tips that perhaps having an overview paragraph, just like you did with the last assignment, you could do that here as well. So some sort of opening paragraph or two that basically puts the Boston Marathon bombing in either context. Maybe you feel the need to briefly explain what it is. Maybe you feel the need to just, in a very general sense, uh, describe its connection to issues of digital citizenship, which you'll go into more specifically throughout the presentation. Um, but yeah, having some sort of introduction is, I guess, what I'm trying to say might be a good technique. And then organize your presentation around the key points that you wish to make. I mean, after you do all this research, you should have, like, I don't know, several points you want to make. Like, if disinformation was an issue with the Boston Marathon, that might be a key point you'd like to make. If the role in which people helped each other via a very, very specific app is a point you want to make, that's fine. But yeah, organize your presentation around key points that you wish to make, and how digital tools and digital action played a role. Just remember that at least four credible sources need to be used. Okay? So this does have to rely on research. And then I repeat, make sure that you are relying on information from credible sources. Okay, so you're going to have to put in you're going to have to use those same kind of tools or brain tools that you used for last week again. So you think that you found good information. Is it trustworthy? Is it credible? Does it sound legit? You'll have to figure these things out. um, yeah, feel free to spice up your presentation with AP images. It's not a requirement. We'll look at the rubric in just a second, and you'll see that there's no points awarded for. Does the presentation include at least four AP images with the reference number attached? No, but looking at a presentation that's just pure text, again, I don't take points off for it because the rubric doesn't allow me to, but I'm just saying personally, from an aesthetic viewpoint, it doesn't make for the most awesome presentation to read. So if you can spice it up somehow with images, now that you know where to go to find them, or you know how to take screenshots now, as long as you're not taking screenshots of like copyrighted images or something. No, Josh, you can't have anything inappropriate on there. But you know how to take screenshots. You know how to find images. Why not use them? And kind of like the last assignment, just choose appropriate places to put those images. But again, you don't have to. Here's a big one. I should probably put this in bold. Make sure to discuss both positives and negatives of digital citizenship regarding the Boston Marathon. It's actually listed on the assignment sheet and the rubric, okay, that you have to discuss positives and negatives. Students always, I shouldn't say always, but often forget the negatives. They love technology so much that they'll just run out there and talk about, oh my gosh, Facebook was so awesome in terms of people sharing and hugging and communicating, or Twitter was alive with people saying positive things, and all that is true, but there's always a negative side. Even if it's a smaller kind of dark side, there's always something that involves either information going out that isn't correct or people taking advantage of this situation. or like that TED Talk video we saw before, people posting like fake photos or fake information. So there's always a negative side to these events. Josh says Facebook is a bad thing. Well, if you can actually find some sort of information related to the Boston Marathon bombing where Facebook was used inappropriately, or I don't know, caused problems, then there's an example. Finally, bookmark everything in Digo and provide a URL to your Digo library. Um, the rubric in this case actually doesn't require you to include the Deagle list like other assignments do, but I still recommend it because I need your links. If I don't have the link to a Deagle list, then I need like actual URLs, working URLs, in your presentation for your at least four credible sources. Okay, so I need that information somehow so I can check where you got your information from. Just says, may I just have those links? Yeah, that's fine. Like I said, Digo is not a requirement for the rubric this time. It's not like I take off points if there's no Digo list. I just recommend Digo because for the people who've become accustomed to it and like it, it's an easy way for them to just hand in all their links without having to copy and paste four links into their presentation. But if you're comfortable, hey, this is an awesome source. So when I make this statement about X, my statement was informed in part by this piece of research. Sure, drop in, provide the link. That's all I need. Yeah, I both like and don't like Digo. I'm not supposed to say that, but we're near the end of the course, so I guess I can be a bit more honest here. I like Digo in theory. I just think that I think it's a little bit clumsy once you actually get in the system. Like this, the concept itself is awesome, but like moving information around and creating specific lists, just I don't know, it could work a little bit better. Josh, I can't tell if you're joking, but for this class, no, we don't deal with citation issues. You'll get to that in month 4 when you take English, perhaps with me again. Some of you may be seeing me again. And we actually don't use MLA at Full Sail. We use APA format. But yeah, those specific rules regarding citation. For example, let me. As you'll notice, I always put. I hate this every time I click on something. Like here's an AP photo credit. Here's a photo credit. Like all my photos come from allowable sources, so I always give credit. But this is not APA citation. Like if I were using images in any formal sense, there are very, very specific rules for how to cite even images. And luckily in DGL we don't have to get into that, which saves you a lot of heartache. But come month 4 with English, yeah, you're gonna deal with these things pretty in depth. Although I think I make it pretty easy to go through. Okay, real quickly, always look at the rubric so you know what I'm grading on. I'm always shocked. I always feel bad when I have to take off points. But, did the presentation include an explanation of how the concept of digital citizenship was used and how the digital tools impacted the event? So, as an instructor, I'll be looking, did Chanda, did Joshua, did O'Shane, whoever, did they talk about digital citizenship, right? Which is kind of a broader, big picture idea. Did they mention specific digital tools? Uh, right? And not just mentioning, I don't know, email for 2 seconds within your presentation, but actually kind of exploring the roles they played. Uh, I'm not sure why I was a show off. I didn't. I don't think I did anything. Next was the information presented connected to research about the assigned topic. So again, I'll be looking to make sure that you have information that probably centers on several different key points, and that these key points I can see were at least in part inspired by the research that you did. Okay. Oh yeah. I always credit pictures. It's just again, it's a basic responsibility. Um, if I'm on Facebook or something, so lots of people share or trade photos, and sometimes it's just random stuff they found online, and we get a little bit lazy. But I really, really believe that when you're in a professional environment, so either if you're working as an employee like I am for Full Sail, or if you're a student, and a student technically in a way is kind of like an employee too. It's your job to be a student. That in those environments you have to be you have to follow guidelines. Uh, No, I don't think that makes me a nerd. I think that just is. Again, imagine if you were in graphic design. We do have a graphic design program here at Full Sail, although I don't think any of you are in graphic design. I mean, like, there's a very image and text based career field. Like, you can't enter graphic design and just start grabbing stuff from what you see on the internet. Like, you actually have to head out with a camera and take your own photos professionally, or you have to be skillful enough with what do you call it? Design software, not design software, but like drawing tools and drawing software to create your own digital images. But even if you're not in something like graphic design, if you're in music, you're not just going to grab other people's sounds without giving credit. Because you could, by the way, we're going to get into these issues next week during one of my favorite sessions, which is all about copyright. Um, and it's actually, I think, one of the more interesting sessions because students often don't quite know everything that copyright covers. But yeah, I think when you're in the professional environment, you have to follow the rules pretty carefully. Even though, could I get away with it? Could I just go online and Google things and grab images and throw them into my presentation? Yeah, probably. Would any of you personally care or be insulted? Probably not. But again, it's something I feel like I need to do. Okay, you can read through the rest of this on your own. Did the presentation effectively showcase the information? Basically, is it in some sort of presentation form that makes sense? Okay, grammar and so on. And if you look at the detailed things, in order, for example, in category one, in order to get an A level grade, you have to be doing all this stuff. That the presentation is detailed. Okay, um, it, it's detailed about how digital citizenship played a role. It covers digital tools that impact the event, both positive and negative. Okay. There's a relationship between points, so it doesn't just feel like a random accumulation of statements, but it sort of guides the reader through, which is why I kind of recommended following a pretty basic structural format that I think would be obvious to a lot of people, but sometimes it isn't. But that's why I mention it. Having some sort of introduction, building your presentation around key points, and so on. So yeah, make sure that you kind of know what's required of you. Questions about anything that we went over today about digital citizenship, about what you need to do for this Sunday. Okay. Again, I don't think I had to walk you through the assignment so much for this one because think about it. You're kind of doing a lot of things you already know how to do. You now know how to go out and find sources and determine whether they're credible or not. You know how to sort of put together a presentation. You're not required to use AP images, but you know how to do that now if you want to. Same thing with screenshots. So basically, you're just going to go at it. So anything else? Big or small? Or are we good? Chanda said something about PowerPoint or written paper. I don't know what written paper means. Oh, you mean like an essay? No, for this assignment, it really pick the presentation tool that works best for you. In theory, you could write a really efficient essay that covers everything that needs to be done. Because remember, images are not a requirement, screenshots are not a requirement. I'm just saying that I think in the past most people have chosen some sort of presentation format. But I certainly wouldn't grade down if you wanted to try to write like I don't know, like a 5, 6 paragraph essay that really kind of efficiently teaches the reader about this event and the role that digital citizenship played. Like that would work. I wouldn't take off points for that. It's just that I have to determine on some level is it meeting the is it the best choice for the delivery? And if you can write if you think writing is a strength of yours, then yeah, an essay could be a really terrific way to present this information. But I would say 99.9% of the time, people choose some sort of presentation tool like PowerPoint or Prezi or something like that. But actually, I'd kind of be excited to see him with someone who wants to tackle the challenge of actually writing just an old school essay, because you could actually do that. Yeah. Don't accept the challenge if you don't if you're not really up for it. Actually, that's fine. Like I said, I mean, I grade according to that rubric. So there's nowhere on that rubric that allows me to say, oh, it should have been PowerPoint, or it should have had images, or it should have looked pretty, or it should have, I just have to judge: does the information make sense? Is it pretty thorough and detailed? And if it's doing that, then you're fine. Okay, people, are we good to go? Because if we are, I won't force you to hang around. John is getting. I'm gonna stop the recording because now we're getting into issues about apartments in Orlando. So the session is going to end now in terms of the recording.